Every financial guru says you need an emergency fund, but if you also have debt, does it really make sense to have money sitting in a savings account earning zero interest when you could use that money to pay down your credit card and save yourself 20% in interest? Is it safe to continue to rely on your credit cards and lines of credit for an emergency? And if you have debt but decide you want to do an emergency fund, how can you do it? Where's the balance? Well, lots to discuss. Diane Cunha is here, and it all starts right now.
This is Debt Free in 30. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
Diane, welcome back.
Thank you.
So you used to, according to my cue card here, work at a bank, and then you were a not-for-profit credit counselor, and now you're a credit counselor here in Kitchener at Hoyes Michalos, and I like to have you on the show because then we can argue. And,
yeah.
You know, you always put up a good fight, so I've never won one yet, but I think this is the day I'm going to do it. So you were on the show in March of 2020. Do you remember March of 2020? That was the before time.
It was just before.
Just before. And we did a show called Bad Credit Decisions That Can Backfire. And you and I had some differing opinions on that show. The first time, I think it was the first time you were on the show, was about a year and a half ago, show number 225, a show that will live in infamy, where I took the position that credit cards are very dangerous and, you know, like, no means no, never have them. And you said, well, okay, but there are some strategies you can use, and there are some times where, you know, if you're disciplined about it, you can earn points and so on and so forth and not carry wads of cash. So there are reasons to use credit cards if you do it wisely. So that's show number 225. We'll put all the links in the show notes. So today we're going to talk about emergency funds. And so, of course, you all read my book, which for those of you who are listening on radio won't see it, but I'm holding it up to the camera, Straight Talk on Your Money, available online, Amazon, wherever, where I took the position that your priority, if you have debt, should be to pay down debt. Don't be worrying about setting up an emergency fund. Where your opinion is, well, no, there are times where an emergency fund is actually a good idea, even if you have debt. So that's what I want to discuss today. So let's start with the obvious question. Give me a simple definition of what is an emergency fund.
Well, emergency fund is just money that you set aside for emergencies. So very simple.
Pretty simple. And
Pretty
that
simple.
can be in pretty much any form. It could be a savings account, could be a TFSA, could be cash, whatever. There are two kinds of emergencies, I guess.
Yes.
So again, I got a cue card here that has, you've given me these notes. So you tell me, you explain these to me. So the first type of emergency is exactly what we would expect, a catastrophe. Like, for example, I'll give you a hypothetical example. There's this big virus that sweeps the world and none of us can work.
Right.
Okay. I'm making stuff up here, obviously, but that would be an example of an emergency.
Yeah.
What are other catastrophic things that could happen to me where I would need an emergency fund?
Well, it's funny. So these topics I talk about during my credit counseling sessions, and we discuss, okay, why is it important to have emergencies? So having for the catastrophic emergency fund is just in case, what if you call in sick, or you don't have sick pay, or you used all your sick days, or you do lose your job because of this hypothetical virus, and it could be many things. It's the unexpected but potential, I guess I would say. So anybody could lose their job. Nobody knows if their job is safe tomorrow or the next day. They could think it is, but we really don't know. So it's important to have money saved aside, that the just in case kind of.
And so
way.
that's the catastrophe.
Yeah.
But you could also have you kind of referred to it as the unexpected expected.
Right.
Give me an example of what you're talking about there.
So I talk about that, again, during credit counseling sessions. We talk about the catastrophic, and then we talk about the expected but unexpected. So that would be, if you have a birthday coming up, or you have an oil change that is going to happen, winter tires, you're going to have those changes. So Christmas is another one. It's saving for those that you have easy accessible money, knowing that you're going to touch that money. That money is going to come out of savings, and just reminding yourself it's meant to be used. However, it's meant to be used for, I guess, the non-monthly type expenses. So things that are going to happen, but not necessarily unknown, I guess, in the next 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, and I guess we could quibble over that definition, because I would argue that I know exactly when Christmas is going to be. The year 2055 It's going to be December 25th.
Correct.
I know that. And what I'd like to do actually is have you back maybe in a couple of weeks in November during Financial Literacy Month, and we can talk more specifically about Christmas. And I'd be interested to get your take on, is Christmas 2020 going to be different than past years? I mean, we've just gone through this pandemic. People haven't spent as much, and so maybe we'll do a whole show on that.
Okay.
So book that in your calendar. We'll come back and talk about that during Financial Literacy Month in November.
Sounds good.
Whereas the example of the car repair you gave, okay, I know that at some point I'm going to have to replace my tires. I'm going to have to change my oil. But I don't know exactly the day it's going to happen. I don't know the day my thing in my car is going to bust, and I'm going to have to the brakes would be an obvious one.
Yeah.
So I go to the mechanic and he says, "Oh yeah, you can probably get another 6 months out of them, maybe." The muffler goes. That would be another obvious one. Well, it's going to go at some point. I don't know when. So that would be an emergency fund for
unexpected, yeah.
But unexpected
Exactly.
events. Okay. So that kind of makes sense to me. Now, back to my bigger picture question then.
Sure.
If I have no debt, then setting up an emergency fund makes perfect sense to me. I've got my Christmas fund and my birthday fund and then my emergency fund for the big bad virus that I didn't know was happening, all that kind of stuff. But if I have debt, does it make sense? So I've got a credit card and I don't have enough money to pay it in full every month, and I'm paying 20% interest. Why would I be setting aside money in a savings account that pays 0% interest? Because I can do the math. This is one thing I'm good at here. $1,000 credit card, 20% interest.
Right.
$200 in interest a year I'm paying on that credit card. Whereas if I put that same $1,000 in a savings account, I get 0. So would it not be better to just say, no, forget about that, pay down debt, don't worry about an emergency fund until you're out of debt?
You made a good point there.
Thank you. I made a good point. There. Let's use that
Not
as
a great one.
Okay. We'll use that as a clip on Twitter. I'm going to win one of these arguments eventually. So
that you'd pay $200 a year if you didn't use the credit card. That's the biggest key, right? So if you're paying down the credit card and the interest is $200, but if you're paying it down, but if you use it again, it's going to be more interest, right? It's going to build. So I think that I just don't like that idea. I like it that if you start putting money aside and start paying off your debt, it's just more beneficial in the sense of that I talk to a lot of clients about this, that I believe a lot of people go into debt because they have debt already. They start paying it down a little bit, but then they're stuck in the cycle of, okay, I'm going to pay this down. And then they put $600 on the credit card. And they put too much down, and then what happens? They start using it for food or extras. And the other thing I find is that people end up almost like subconsciously rewarding themselves because they don't have, essentially you get a paycheck of $1,000, all your money goes to debt, and then it's like, well, I just worked really hard, like what do I get? And you start rewarding yourself for it. So then you start using the credit card again. If you start putting a savings on the side, then what happens is that you see a result. You see an actual result of that. So you also are paying down debt at a manageable level, and then you're also putting money aside, which is great. So putting it all in the credit card, I find that people just don't, they end up spending it and using it almost like as a reward system without knowing. Like I don't think people intentionally do that. I think it's really, where's all my money? I just worked really hard. I worked, overtime and guilt too. A lot of people buy things for their kids because they feel like I can't get it right now, but I do want to get them this. They've been really good, or I promised them this. So it's that cycle I find that people go into. Yeah, and
it's very interesting because I'm sitting here on this side of the desk. I'm an accountant, and so to me, I'm doing the math. $200 in interest. That's the answer. Whereas you're looking at this because you're meeting with real people. I mean, I do too.
Yeah.
But you're not looking at this from the point of view of a spreadsheet. You're looking at this from the point of view of the actual person, the psychology of the situation.
And being realistic as well.
Being realistic.
That's the biggest key, I think, in all of this. But yes, 100%. It's just being realistic about how do you pay off your debts? How much can you save? It all falls together. And again, this is the major focus that we focus on in credit counseling, because the whole point of when you file a proposal or bankruptcy with us, the the credit counseling sessions, and it's meant to be proactive. It's like, okay, this happened. What is the next step? How can we move away from this happening again? Because if I say to you, well, you can get a credit card and you can do this, and it's like, focus is saving first. Take care of yourself first. Take care of your family first, and then worry about paying off any sorts of debts or spending. But when you do have debt, it is important to put money aside so that you don't fall back into that cycle.
And when we talk about these credit counseling sessions, and again, people who watch this show and listen to it will know what we're talking about. But if you file a bankruptcy or consumer proposal, you are required to attend to what we call BIA, Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act, insolvency counseling sessions. We call them credit counseling sessions because that's the term that's been used for 20 or 30 years. And the purpose of those sessions is to give you a fresh start.
Yeah.
So whatever happened in the past, let's figure out what happened and see if we can give you some practical techniques and tools so that you don't get into that situation again.
And it's different for everybody. It's like I said, it's meant to be proactive. It's one-on-one, and it's like, okay, what goals do you want? Because maybe you don't want to buy a house. Maybe you don't want to travel. Maybe you just want savings, and that's a fantastic goal. And that's what the focus is. And I mean, it's a lot easier to save when you do file a proposal or bankruptcy because it's just one small payment towards the debt. But when you do have debt and you're attempting to manage it, I mean, savings is still important.
Yeah, and what we're trying to do is look at this from a psychology point of view. So yes, from a math point of view, it makes sense, pay off your debt, no doubt about it. But from a psychology point of view, if I can get into the habit of saving money, then I establish a new habit. Obviously, people who come in to see us with a lot of debt do not have a lot of savings.
Correct. Yeah. If any.
If any. In fact, it's usually there is nothing. So it's getting into that revised setup. Now, let's talk practical here because that's what this is all about.
Yep.
So I get the idea from a pure math point of view, maybe it doesn't make sense to have an emergency fund while you're in debt. But from a psychology point of view, having the money sitting there and getting into that savings habit kind of makes sense. And we also see, you've seen this 1,000 times, that I get into trouble, I don't have any savings, what do? I go get a payday loan. Well, that's a lot worse than using a credit card. The interest rates are a lot higher. So I would much rather you maybe, again, I'm talking about somebody who isn't bankrupt, but you maybe don't get the credit card paid down quite as much, but there is money there. So you're not resorting to or thinking you need to resort to something like a payday loan. The financial gurus, however, say that you need to have somewhere between 3 and 6 months worth of expenses. So if my rent and my groceries and everything else is, $2,000 a month, well, then I need somewhere between $6,000 and $12,000 in my savings account. And, as we saw here in 2020, can't really argue with that because if you operated a hair salon, you were shut down for 3 months, March, April, May, into June. If you work at a restaurant, well, you may not even be back to work yet. And we're recording this in October of 2020. So okay, that kind of makes sense. 3 to 6 months, $10,000, $12,000. Well, guess what? That's impossible. Like that, if the goal is I've got to save $12,000 in my emergency fund, forget it. There's no way I can possibly do it. That seems very discouraging. What do you tell someone who is discouraged by that process?
Well, that's easily to be discouraged because you think 12 grand and you're like, but I owe X amount of dollars on debt. So what I tell everyone is saving something is better than nothing. So if you're putting away $10 even a paycheck, is it staying in that savings account? Are you using it? It's being realistic because everybody's lifestyle is different. So for me to say, for someone sitting in front of me, you got to save 10%, you got to save 10% of your income. And then, well, I'm a single mom and I have kids and I got to worry about daycare and I got to worry about this. It doesn't make sense. So it's okay, let's look over the budget, see how much can you save and look at that. I mean, the big thing that happened in obviously March, it was all over social media, the news, how many people were terrified of paying April's rent or mortgage. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, that's how many people don't have savings, potentially or most likely are in debt. And it's a scary feeling. It's a scary thought. So this hopefully is something that is like a wake up call to say, okay, let's save anything is better than zero. save something. But that's the biggest key that I tell everybody. At the end of the day, it's not really that amount would be fantastic, but it's being realistic.
So let's get into practical advice here.
Sure.
My first question then, and so let's assume, okay, you win the argument. We agree you should have an emergency fund no matter what your situation is. And okay, you're saying start with baby steps, put aside $5, $10, whatever. Where should I put that? Should I have cash in an envelope that's in my, drawer at my house? Should I have it in a savings account? Should I have it in a TFSA? Where should I physically have my savings?
I think everyone's different. Put your savings where you feel like you have control over it. So meaning like, for example, some people do like cash because like seeing it. And seeing it is I guess it's a psychological thing. I know that if you carry cash to the grocery store, you're more likely to not use all of that cash. If you take a debit card, it's probably 10% more. Credit cards, 20% more. So if you physically see that cash there, sometimes it helps people to be like, all right, I got a ton of cash. I don't want to use it. Having larger bills are better as well. But some people, some people tell me, they're like, I'm going to spend the money. And I say, okay, well, look at your budget, see what can you essentially change in your budget so that you can start saving money. Because my job is not to say, well, cut out this and why is your kid playing soccer? No, if that's important, you either need to bring more money in or take something out. And I talk about all the time, easiest thing to adjust on a budget is food. That is the most, I think, wasted amount.
Why is that?
I think nowadays things are convenient. I don't think people crave bad fast food. Like, I don't crave garbage burgers. It's more of it's done, it's convenient, and people are tired and they don't meal prep. And meal prepping on, I tell people, what best day to do is on a Sunday. Just take the day, prep a couple of meals. You can do that can reach out for a couple of lunches and stuff. And I think just people, it's all about time and having time for yourself. And times are different now than they were like 50 years ago.
So what you're saying is, on the weekend when you're listening to the podcast, that's when you should be doing your meal prep.
Yeah,
is that
half an hour?
There you go.
Lots
half an hour, debt free in 30. So I get what you're saying on your food, because when you first said that, I thought, well, okay, I go to the grocery store, I buy these, 10, 20, 30 items. There's not a whole lot of areas to save there. Bread is bread. But what you're saying is, well, no. Look at what you actually spend on food. How much are you ordering that's takeout? I mean, it's not like we're going to restaurants a whole lot these days, but we used to in the past. It's a lot easier now to order in because you're home.
Or get those home delivery,
Home delivery things, I think that's where you got to price it out and see.
It could be double. It could be double of what you would pay at the restaurant.
Right. But if compared to ordering, and I guess there's three levels to it, right? Mm-hmm. I can go to the store and make it myself. That would be the cheapest. I can order from these meal preparation services where they ship it to you in a box and you prepare it. Mm-hmm. Obviously, that's more expensive than doing it yourself. But then the most expensive would be, full on takeout where they're making the meal and sending it to you. The advantage of those meals in a box thing is you're only buying exactly what you need.
Exactly.
And in my experience, well, it may actually give you 2 meals worth, so maybe it isn't horrendously expensive. But that's really your point. It's not what you're buying at the grocery store that's killing you. It's all those other things.
It's the extras. And not meal prepping, you're going to end up buying more. And I tell people as well, I'm like, if you use, people are like, I can't do the envelope system. I'm like, okay, well, just take cash to the grocery store, because I guarantee you're not going to spend all that money that you have budgeted.
Because it's real.
Yeah. And you don't want to be there to be like, well, I can't take that and that. You're going to spend less than what you have. I've tried that theory for a month, and you do end up spending a lot less because you physically see, okay, if I only have $100 for the week or whatever, it's like, this is what I have on food, and you save more money that way.
Yeah, and I know in these days of COVID, we don't want to be using actual paper money because you get the COVID from it, and it's, becoming less and less of a thing. But another strategy similar to that would be to say, okay, I'm going to open up a bank account at one of these online banks that has no service charges, so I can have as many accounts as I want. Yeah. I'm going to get a separate bank account just for groceries.
Yeah.
I'm going to get a separate debit card just for groceries. Every week, I'm going to put whatever my grocery budget is in there, or every paycheck, I'll just automatically transfer it $100 a week, $200 a week, whatever the number is. well, that's almost like cash.
Exactly.
Because I can see on the app on my phone that I've got $97 left to spend in that account. So when I go to the grocery store, I can only spend $97. I kind of like that idea because if your house burns down, you don't lose the cash that was in your house.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Nobody can steal your cash. And you can keep very close track of it because on the app on the phone, you can see every single thing that you bought.
Yeah,
So,
and you can also change those names too, right? It doesn't have to say checking account, savings, 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 savings. You can actually go online and change it to say, food budget or emergency savings. I've done that with my accounts.
cool.
Yeah, you can do that, which is fantastic. And again, it's a visual thing. Again, if you want a vacation account, it's all about the visuals and saying, okay, this is meant for emergencies. It doesn't just say savings. It says emergency funds or
Groceries,
vacation.
food, whatever.
Yeah.
I like that. I did not know. See, there we go. We're getting practical advice.
great.
We're going to have to raise the price of a subscription to this show with all this good stuff. So you have actually given me a whole bunch of other tips here. So I want to go through these and you comment on them. So create a small slush fund, which is another word for an emergency fund, for unexpected, expected living expenses. So maybe I want to get to 500 or $1,000 or something while I am still making all the minimum payments or more on all my other debts. So what are you getting at with that idea?
Again, I think it's feeling like you're in control as well, like feeling control of paying off your debts, but also control of your money, and control of savings. So having that slush fund is the expected, unexpected, so that when your car, your car needs new brake pads because they're at the 2% level, it's like, okay, I need to pay that now. That's a priority. So you do have that money in the slush fund for it, and it doesn't feel like a defeat. I think that's a lot of people do feel that way. So it's like a defeat, like you feel defeated that it's like, geez, I just paid all this money to the credit card and now I got to use it again. And that's like a big cycle that people fall into. And it's tough to get out. So if you use your own money, then you're thinking, okay, I mean, it's too bad my money went down, but I did have my own funds for it.
Yeah, that is a really good point. If I set aside money for my brake pads, and you're telling me 2% is bad, so I'm going to make a note of that. 2% is bad. But if I've set that money aside and then I have to spend it on my brake pads, it's like, well, that's what I set it aside for. It's not a defeat. In fact, it's a victory. Look at me. I set the money aside and there it is.
Yes. And I have to remind people that when I ask them, their second session, how's budgeting? Do you have any savings? Yeah, I only got $700. Give me $700.
Yeah.
I was like, that's a lot of money. And changing the mindset of don't think of it as only, think of it as something. It's better than zero. It is more than you potentially ever had. So it's good to continue to put it aside again, like a visual, and that you're going to use it. It's 100% going to be used.
Yeah, you are setting yourself up for success here. You're rigging the game in your favor.
Yes, and it's making you feel good to be like, okay, yeah, it sucks. I got to use my own money, but my credit card is still going down, and I just have to replenish, keep doing what I'm doing, and because something will come up again. And you already know in your mind, this was meant for this.
Yep. Yeah, I totally like that. It's like having a two-sided coin. Well, it doesn't matter which way I flip it, man. I'm winning this game.
Yeah,
I already know.
Yeah.
So if my brake pads last longer than I thought, great. I got extra money sitting in the account. If they don't, well, the money's sitting there. I'm good. So either way, I win. As opposed to, oh man, now I got to draw on the credit card, as you say.
Yeah.
It's an automatic defeat. So if I get to the point where I've got whatever I want as my emergency savings fund, do you then agree with me? Let's see if we can get one point you agree with me on today, that whatever extra cash I've got should be going towards high interest rate debt as opposed to spreading it out amongst all of them or paying the smaller ones first.
Yeah, I mean, if you have established like a nice slush fund and you work overtime, I mean, you're living without that money anyway. Realistically, ideally, it would be nice to put that money extra. You make an extra $200 on your paycheck, put that on the credit card. I mean, you're already saving. You already have that process. I mean, you could save that money, but it would help your debt to go down as well. So it could go either way, but you're living without that money anyway. That's what I tell everybody as well. It's like you don't work overtime all the time. It's not a guaranteed thing for anyone. So when you do make extra money, put it towards the debt. Or if you really want to build up your slush fund again because you just put in your new brake pads, then put it in the savings. So it can go either way, I think.
Yeah, you're in control of it.
Exactly.
So okay, and you've given me some other tips here, which we've, I think already hit on. Once your credit card, consumer debt balances are paid off, start building an emergency fund for the catastrophic event. So you start off with the, brake pads, which I know are going to happen. And then once I've got a fund for that, okay, let's, start setting aside money for, COVID number 2.
Yeah, because this time last year, nobody knew. Even back in January and February when we heard about it, we never thought it would be this like it was in Italy. Never. It was just mind-boggling that this happened so quickly, like overnight.
And now that we've seen it, okay, well, I guess that kind of convinces me I do need to prepare for those catastrophic events.
For sure.
So let's now go into listener mail. So we have a Hoyes Michalos newsletter that goes out to many tens of thousands of people every month. And we ask people, hey, look, if you got a question, fire it back to us. So I've got a few questions here that I want to throw at you.
Sure.
And get your thoughts on them. So, and these are, again, actual questions from real people. When on a tight budget with not a lot of disposable income, okay, that's pretty much everybody, and budgeting for a family, how important is it to pay yourself first, for emergencies and savings? How much is a good rule of thumb, and should that come before other bills? So I know exactly what this question is getting at. It's the old financial advice, always pay yourself first. You should always put 10% of your money in savings first. Do you have that type of a hard line approach?
No, because again, it's being realistic. I mean, this person says they have a family, so it's not just one person. And they can see, yes, it's important, but how important is it? Well, it's super important. You should be paying yourself, but it's being realistic about how much you pay yourself. I mean, if you're in a family of 5 and your household income is just enough to pay bills and you have, $500 left for gas or something, and it's like, okay, out of that, how much gas do you spend for the month? Maybe you spend $200. Well, be realistic. That extra $300, maybe put $200 away from that, because maybe there's a give or take of $100 for whatever reason. I always say, you know what, anything is better than zero. I'm not going to say put 10% of your income away. That doesn't seem realistic, unless you can. That is fantastic. But again, it's just you don't want that defeated feeling of, I just can't do it. So why even bother?
Well, which brings us to the next question. What is the proper amount to save? So again, this is a question from one of our viewers. My wife and I try to put a few hundred away every paycheck, and sometimes that's too much and we need to pull back some out of savings. Other times we have extra paycheck money and we are able to save. Is there a ratio or percentage we should aim for to have some balance?
Yeah. So I see this a lot as well. I think that some people that actually do or are able to actually save some money, they end up putting too much away. And again, it's like, well, what's the point of savings? Because I'm constantly pulling it out. Well, then you're putting too much aside. So lower that amount. So if you're putting $300 aside, go down to $200 and slowly increase it after maybe a month or two and see, okay, where you're at. Also, if you're working overtime, if there's extra money in the paycheck, you're living without that. Save that money. You don't need to put that towards extra food, because you already have your food budget. Everything is going great. So it's like, put that money aside. It's always best to save as much as you can, but also, not too much, because then you will be pulling out and feeling like, what's the point of my I'm not saving anything.
Yeah, and it's kind of like driving a car on the highway. Well, I speed up a little. I there's a car in front of me. I slow down a bit. I'm constantly adjusting. And I think if you have a dogmatic approach where I must save 10% of my paycheck before I pay any other bills every single week, then some weeks that might work out great for you, but then other weeks it's like, well, no, I have to spend money on this, there's a sale on stuff at the grocery store. I think I should spend my money on that because that's going to save me money in the long run. You got to have a more, flexible approach to it, I guess.
It's got to be balanced. And I mean, and it's not saying like, don't do any extra things. Like it's always about balance and saying, okay, maybe with the savings, I do tell people as well, wait till, do you have any money left before your next pay? Because maybe
that's
you get paid
an excellent point.
If you have money left, if you have like $200 left in your checking account and you get paid tomorrow, why wouldn't you put that money into savings? Because you just lived without it for the past week or two or whatever. Put that in. And again, start the week fresh again, or the 2 weeks with that new paycheck. Pay your bills, see what you can live off of. And then if you can't save money because of whatever reason, you still save the $200 from the previous check. So it's looking at that as well.
Yeah. So you're quoting from the esteemed philosopher, Dr. Phil, who says, how's that working out for you? And that's really what you're saying. So I think he was an esteemed philosopher. So if I put aside $200 a week, does that work? Or am I always short? Do I always have extra left over? Okay, well, let's try 150. Let's try 25. Let's try 10. Let's see what happens. And if it is working, then it's working. And it doesn't matter what the books say. It doesn't matter what percentage you're shooting for. Is it working for you?
Exactly.
And if it is, then that's the right number. And that's what you should be shooting for. Yeah.
I mean, it's like I said, it's all about being realistic. You just can't put high expectations on something. I mean, like I said, ideally, it'd be great if you can save 10%, but times are different now. Like so many people are struggling and don't have savings. And it's like, start now, because we don't know what the next few months are going to bring.
We didn't know what the last few months would bring.
No, we did not.
Excellent. Well, I think that's very good advice. Start now, make it realistic for you, and then adjust as needed. Diane, thanks very much for being here.
Thank you.
So we already talked about this. One of the big reasons for having a savings fund is to save for Christmas. So for many, it's the biggest holiday of the year. It's the only time of year that, business is closed for a couple of days in a row and families get together. I assume that's going to happen in 2020, but I don't know. What is the impact that's going to have on our spending this year? Are we going to spend less on Christmas this year, or are we actually going to spend more because we've been cooped up and we can use Amazon and get it direct to our door? I want you to give me your comments on that. So we're going to have you back in a couple of weeks to talk about that. We'll have another argument, you'll be in favor of Christmas and I'll be against it or something is probably how it'll work. So we'll see how that goes. So we will do that in a couple of weeks' time. For now, that's our show for today. If you found this discussion helpful, please share the link with your friends, subscribe to the audio version on your favorite podcasting app. You can get it right on your phone. And if you're watching on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button and the notification belly thingy there. And that way you'll know when we release a new episode of Debt Free in 30, which happens every Saturday morning. And we also do Debt Free in 30 explainer videos, which are really short. Diane is featured in some of those, as are myself and Ted Michalos. So you want to be, when they come out too. And I certainly appreciate it if you hit the like button and share, because that gets the word out, gets it into the YouTube algorithm, and more people can see the show. So thanks for listening. Until next week, when I've got a rant about financial literacy, because November is financial literacy month, so you're going to want to listen into that. I'm Doug Hoyes. Thanks for listening. That was Debt Free in 30.